I hope you're having a good day today, and I appreciate you joining me. We are going to continue to look in Esther today. Our hymn is a hymn called Courage, My Soul, While God is Near.
Courage, my soul, while God is near. What enemy hast thou to fear? He is thy sure, ardent defense. Thy refuge is omnipotent.
I appreciate it, Lee. Verse 2. Though thickest dangers crowd my way, my God can chase my fears away. My steadfast heart on him relies, and all those dangers still defies. Though billows after billows roll to overwhelm my sinking soul, firm as a rock my faith shall stand, upheld by God's almighty hand. In life his presence is my aid, in death 'twill guide me through the shade, chase all my rising fears away, and turn my darkness into day. Let's look at our passage now. And I am in no way where we need to be. Let me get over there. We are in Esther chapter 5 today. In Esther chapter 5, let me make it a little bit bigger so that you can see it. Let's just start in verse 1. It says, Now it happened on the third day that Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, across from the king's house, while the king sat on his royal throne in the royal house facing the entrance of the house. So it was, when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, that she found favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Then Esther went near and touched the top of the scepter. And let's actually back up and look at where we left off yesterday, because what I wanted us to think about today is to think about courage. And so as Esther had told or gotten the message to Mordecai, Go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise, and so I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. And then we have today's reading. And what I was thinking about was courage, and courage needed in as Esther needed courage to face the king. The message sent to Mordecai was, if I die, I die. She goes and she is respectful, and she is waiting for the scepter to give the sign. And I'll tell you, in my notes I put it this way: fear of the king. But I think we should put perhaps a better slant on it: courage to face the king, courage to overcome fear. And that when we think about politics and we think about the governing authorities, we need to have courage. And sometimes governing authorities may do things that we do not agree with, and sometimes it just strikes people with fear. And they're so afraid of what the future holds for the country. And, all the wickedness that's happening in the Capitol, or all that, and it's whether it's this country or other countries, we need to have courage. And we need to recognize the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And we give honor to whom honor is due. And such things as that, as Scripture commands. But we have courage when we think about we have courage when we think about the governing authorities and we think about matters pertaining to politics. We should take courage. And here Esther is, and she's taking courage as she comes before the king. Let's read on. Verse 3. The king said to her, What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom. And so Esther answered, If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him. Now remember, Haman has manipulated things, and so he wants to kill all the Jews. And so Esther has this idea. And so what she's going to do is she's going to have she prepares a feast for the king and for Haman. And they come on the first day and ask what she would like. And she says, let's do it tomorrow as well. I will prepare a feast, and you and Haman return tomorrow. And so that's where Haman goes his way, and he sees Mordecai, who still refuses to, let me see how it phrases it. This is chapter 5 at verse 10. Nevertheless, let's see, that Mordecai did not stand or tremble before him. And Haman was filled with indignation against Mordecai. And so it goes on, and then you have the second day, the second feast, and that's where Esther speaks about what's happening. And it's chapter 7. And let's put this up on the screen if you're not familiar with it. In chapter 7, Esther says, verse 3, "If I found favor in your sight, O king, let my life be given me at my petition." Verse 4, "We've been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed." The king says, "Who would dare to do such a thing?" And Esther points out it's Haman. And of course, Haman then is going to be hanged by order of the king. When we are facing enemies, we need to take courage. When there are enemies of the cross, we need to take courage. We need to take courage as we go through this life. I've made this point before in Revelation when it talks about those who are cast into the lake of fire. The very first people that are mentioned are the cowards. We need to take courage. That's why we need to be Barnabases, and we need Barnabases in our lives. Sons of encouragement. We need to be sons and daughters of encouragement. We need people to encourage us. We need to encourage others to do the right thing, to stand fast in the faith. And we need to stand against the foe. And as you think about enemies, who's the last enemy? Well, the last enemy to be destroyed is death. We need to take courage in dealing with death. And that's what Esther's doing here. That's what Mordecai is doing. They're dealing with issues involving life and death. We need to take courage when we are facing adversaries. Might be in our own family. The Lord speaks about that. Father and mother, brother and sister. Man's enemies will be those of his own household, so it might be with family members, might be with friends who are opposed to the ways of righteousness, might be co-workers, might be any manner of people. Take courage. Ultimately, in thinking about matters pertaining to courage and fear, I wanted you to notice something. And I'll admit freely that I had forgotten something that is said here. And so, chapter 6, the king honors Mordecai. The king couldn't sleep one night. Excuse me. And so he asks for the book of basically their histories, the chronicles. They were read before the king. And he reads about how Mordecai had saved the king. And he says, what honor has been done for the man? And they hadn't done anything for him. And so, what ends up happening is the king says, Haman comes in. And this is right about where Haman was going to ask if they could please hang Mordecai on gallows that he had prepared. So Haman comes in, and the king says, what shall be done for the man to whom the king delights? Now Haman thought, well, surely he delights in me. Surely the king delights in me. And so Haman says a royal robe should be brought out. He should be put on a horse and a crest placed upon his head. All of these things. And the king says, thus it shall be done to the man to whom the king delights to honor. That's what was going to be said. And so the king says to Haman, do as you have said, to paraphrase it. And lo and behold, Haman takes the horse. Verse 11. Haman had to obey, and he took the robe and the horse, and he arrayed Mordecai and led him on horseback. And Haman proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights. Afterward, Mordecai goes back to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house, mourning with his head covered. When Haman told his wife, Zeresh, and all his friends everything that had happened to him, they say to him, his wife said to him, if Mordecai before whom you have begun to fall is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. Now come all the way back to verse 1. That whole account starts because that night the king could not sleep. The king could not sleep. Now, why do you think the king couldn't sleep? Do you think that was just a natural thing? Do you think it was just a coincidence that all of a sudden they're reading from the book of the Chronicles and they read about this Mordecai? You think that's just happenstance? Think Mordecai was just lucky that that was read at that time? Or do you think the Lord's hand is behind all of that? Now here's the point. Because we've spoken about courage in dealing with the king, courage in dealing with enemies, and like I said, the part of that is fear. Who you really should fear is you should fear the living God. When the living God draws near, that's what Jesus says. You don't fear those who can kill the body. I'll tell you who you should fear, and you should fear the Lord. And the Lord has come nigh unto Haman. And his wife says, if you have begun to fall, right? How does she put it again? Down in that verse, if you have begun to fall, if Mordecai before whom you have begun to fall is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. You know what he should have done right then? He should have gone to the king and he should have said, we need to stop what we're doing. That's what he should have done. He should have repented right there on the spot. His wife said, you have begun to fall. And if he's a Jew, which he knew he was a Jew, she says this is not going to work. And she was right. It didn't work. And Haman is going to be hung by his own gallows. The Lord had come nigh. The Lord had come nigh. And of course, if you're not familiar with how the account ends, I would encourage you to read it on your own. The Lord prevails. The Lord's people prevail. The Lord's enemies, the enemies of the Jews, of course, they fall. And it was a great fall. And so we fear the king. We may even think about needing courage dealing with enemies and death, but who you should really fear is the Lord. Fear God and keep his commandments. Appreciate you. Hope you have a good day. Join us tomorrow for another portion of our daily praise.